good vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my friends, and a good Chodesh. Chodesh Tov, it is the new month of Elul, the final month of the Hebrew year. This whole month, we're doing an introspection. We're getting ready for the days of awe, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, which will come with the first day of the next month, Tishrei. But Elul is this very special time, the last month of the Hebrew year. As we look forward to Rosh Hashanah, we have a teaching that the king is in the field. Meaning God, the King, who is always welcoming us back into the fold, always welcoming anybody who wants to make an atonement, make a repentance, come closer, remove the obstacles between us and a higher, more spiritual, more lofty existence, closer to our mission in this world. Not only does he want us to make that return, but he wants it so much that, like a parent who's not going to stand on ceremony and welcoming the child, he runs out of the castle and into the field to find us and welcome us even in our own domain. So right now in this month of Elul, God is near. He's just there waiting for you to call on him. All right, my friends, very, very exciting. Nina's still away, delivering our daughter to college, so I'm on my own. I'll be scanning the comments at the end of class, do my best to find them. Reminder, no class tomorrow, Sunday. I'm going to my friend's wedding, so we'll do a double daf on Monday. No class tomorrow, double page on Monday. Where are we holding tonight? We're doing page 52, Nun Base, here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud. We are in chapter 4, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 7. Mishnah number 7, basically saying that when a husband and when a man and wife met, when a man and woman marry, and he writes a ketubah for her, a marriage contract, she may not waive her right to the minimum amount of a marriage settlement, even if she wanted to. She's entitled to that minimum amount that the sages stipulated. Moreover, even if they didn't write into the contract that if she is taken captive by a marauding army or by kidnappers, that he will redeem her and that he will take care of her, and that if she needs medical costs, he will pay those bills. Even if that's not written in the contract, it's part of the contract. Even if they didn't write a contract, later when they get divorced or he dies, that money gets paid, that minimum amount, and while they're married, he must redeem her, etc. Okay, we picked this up near the bottom of 51b. Oh, wait a minute. See, Nina's not here. Everything goes crazy. Let's light up the darkness. Right. And who is with us? Karen in Northern California, Sharon in New Jersey, Bella in Florida, John in Texas, Patrice in Utah, Michael in Louisiana, Melissa in Great Neck, New York, Alan in New Jersey. Alan says shalom. Sharon, thank you for reminding me. Will you be blowing the shofar before our learning again this year? Well, we don't generally blow the shofar at night. We do start blowing the shofar tomorrow morning. Every morning at the end of morning services, at the end of morning prayers, we blow the shofar in the month of Elul, a big wake-up call to everybody. So, in our evening classes, we're not meeting tomorrow because I'm going to that wedding, but on Monday, it's still daylight here in LA. So, yeah, I'll be blowing that shofar starting. Yes, absolutely. Good idea. I'll blow this shofar. We don't usually blow it at night, so I'm not going to blow it now. But I'll be blowing this shofar with God's help before all our classes starting Monday. Okay. Bill in Mid-Missouri, Alyssa in Sparks, Nevada, Ruth in Kentucky, Herschel, where can I get a copy of the Mishnah? Art Scroll publishes it. We don't just have the Mishnah here, we have the whole Talmud, so the Mishnah and the Gemara, and I'm using the Koren Talmud. But here's the good news. It's all online for free at Sefaria. SEFARIA.org. And soon, the whole Talmud and the whole Tanakh will be available on the AT app. We have started the development process. Our app developer is on it. We don't have anything to show you right now because what they're doing is the back end stuff that's not so pretty, but it's all the software that's going to be needed to make this a reality. But we are working with Menny Steinsaltz, the son of Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, whose commentary we are reading every night in our class. And Rabbi Menny Steinsaltz is making the entire Koran, or the entire Steinsaltz commentary with the entire Talmud translation, and the Bible, the whole Bible, the Tanakh, and some other materials available for us to put on the AT app. That's actually a really big deal. We haven't made that formal announcement yet, but you've heard it now. So all of that will be available on the AT app. The AT app is not available yet, so you can get online, the whole Koran translation in English and commentary, etc., at sefaria.org in the Talmud section. Belle is here with us. Welcome. Annie from Michigan as well. I didn't get here we go. The YouTube is up for me. There we go. Yitzhak in Kansas City. Marie in Long Island. Lynn in North Texas. Okay, welcome everybody. Let's get to it. We're at the bottom of 51b. By the way, I was talking to my son today, and let's just note one more time that it's amazing, right? When we first started this particular Daf Yomi Shir, this class at the Daf, I didn't think for our audience it would make sense to read the whole Daf every class, and we were just doing highlights or excerpts or something really interesting from the Daf, sometimes longer sections if it made sense for, our kind of very diverse audience and, sort of my level as a teacher. But over time, we're in our third year now, this has advanced quite a bit. And now we do the whole Daf every day. And that's a real testimony to you, my friends, that you're up for learning the whole Daf every day with all its complexity and all its challenges. We don't always do it if I'm on vacation doing a makeup show or something like that. But generally speaking, we're doing the whole Daf every day. Which is usually just like the realm of yeshiva graduates, but we are doing it together. So pretty awesome. Okay. The Mishna taught, and in the case of a priestess, meaning the wife of a priest, even if her husband did not write, if you are taken captive, I will redeem you and return you to your native province, he is obligated to do so, right? So a husband is obligated to redeem his wife from captivity. Why is a priest mentioned? That's a little bit of a special case because in the old times, tragically, if a woman was taken captive, it was pretty much a given that she was raped by her captors. Not a problem. Obviously, it's a huge tragedy, but it's not a problem in terms of her returning to her marriage if she's married to a regular Jew, a Yisrael, or a Levi, like me. But if her husband happened to be a Cohen, a priest, then because even against her will, she had been with another man, she would be prohibited to her husband. So in redeeming her, he was just redeeming her so she could go free back to her father's house, but he could not be married to her. So you might think, well, maybe he's not going to be so motivated to redeem her from captivity if she can't return to their marriage, but he's obligated to do so, even if he didn't write that into the marriage contract. Abaye said, in the case of a widow who was married to a high priest. Now, that was a prohibited union from the start. A priest cannot marry a divorcee, but he can marry a widow. A high priest cannot even marry a widow. So if he had married a widow, they're supposed to break up that marriage. Now, you might think, well, he married her, it was a prohibited union, but they did it anyway, and then she was taken captive, so is he obligated to redeem her? Abaye said, in the case of a widow who was married to a high priest, although the marriage is prohibited by Torah law, if she is taken captive, he is obligated to redeem her, as I apply to her the clause, and in the case of a priestess, the wife of a Cohen, I will return you to your native province. Her husband can and therefore must fulfill this clause just as he could if he had married a woman who was permitted to him. Now we're on 52a. In the case of a mamzeres or a Gibeonite woman married to an Israelite who are entitled to a marriage contract despite the fact that their relationship is forbidden and they must get divorced, there he is not obligated to redeem her, says Abaye, as I do not apply to her the clause, and I will restore you to me as a wife, as she is forbidden to him. Rava said, in any case where the prohibition of her captivity, i.e. the fact that she was taken captive, causes her to be forbidden to her husband, as in the case of a priest's wife who was taken captive, he is obligated to redeem her. However, if another prohibition causes her to be forbidden to her husband, for example, the case of a widow who is married to a high priest, he is not obligated to redeem her. The Gemara suggests, let us say that this is parallel to a dispute between Tanaim, as it is taught in a Baraisa in the case of one who vows that his wife may not derive benefit from him, in which case he must divorce her, and she is then taken captive. Rabbi Eliezer says he redeems her, and he gives her the payment for the marriage contract, meaning that divorces her. Rabbi Yehoshua says he gives her the payment for her marriage contract, but he does not have to redeem her, as he may not take her back as his wife due to his vow. Right? The case of the mamzeres, the man was prohibited to marry her because she's a child of adultery, and Jews are not allowed to marry a mamzer. Right? A mamzer can marry another mamzer, but not a Jew. Now, people who are married, and he takes a vow that you will not benefit from me, or she takes a vow, I will not benefit from you, they've just made it impossible for them to be married. They should not have taken that vow. They took that vow. Unless they can get that vow annulled, then they have to divorce, because you can't be in a marriage after you have vowed that you will not benefit from your spouse. And so that's why they've created a prohibition on their marriage, where you might think he's not going to be obligated to redeem her. He may redeem her, but he may not be obligated to. Rabbi Nassan said, I asked Sumachos, when Rabbi Yehoshua said that he gives her the payment for her marriage contract, but he does not have to redeem her, was he referring to a case where he vowed that she may not derive benefit from him, and she was subsequently taken captive, or was he speaking of one who was taken captive, and he subsequently vowed that she may not derive benefit from him? Right now, what they're getting at here is, imagine, so if you had already taken this vow that, you may not benefit from me, or she says, I will not benefit from you, as a vow, now their marriage is already like walking dead, right? Like they need to divorce because of that vow. What if they were just regular married and she gets taken captive? And then he says, okay, I vow that she cannot benefit from me. Because what he really wants is to not have to redeem her, because maybe this marriage was on the rocks and he wants to get out of his obligation to have to redeem her, because that's the obligation of all Jewish husbands to their wives. That's the question being asked here. And Sumachos said to me, to Rabbi Nassan, I have not heard a tradition on this matter, but it would appear that Rabbi Yehoshua does not obligate the husband to redeem her in a situation where he vowed that she may not derive benefit from him, and after that she was taken captive. As if you say the same law applies in a case where she was taken captive and then he made the vow that she may not derive benefit from him, well, the husband might come to engage in trickery. If he wants to release himself from the duty to ransom his wife after she is captured, he can simply vow that she may not derive benefit from him, in which case he would be obligated to pay only the marriage contract. We don't allow that. The Gemara now analyzes the suggested comparison between the opinions cited in this Baraisa and the dispute between Abaye and Rava. Now what? Is it not the case that the Tanaim, the rabbis of the Mishnah, disagree about a priest who vows that his wife, i.e. the wife of a priest, may not derive benefit from him? And Abaye spoke in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer when he said that the husband must redeem his wife even if she is forbidden to him due to something other than the fact that she was taken captive. And Rava spoke in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. So the Gemara refutes this suggestion, like they're trying to draw a parallel between one dispute and another dispute and say that these are consistent positions, but as is so often the case, no, because if you understand the circumstances better, you can't derive that analogy from one case to the other. The Gemara refutes this suggestion. No. With what are we dealing here? With a case where she vowed not to benefit from him. and her husband upheld it for her by neglecting to nullify her vow when he heard it. As we've learned a few times the last few days, women have this advantage, right? People should not take vows upon themselves because they create an obligation that was not imposed upon them by the Holy One, blessed be He, in the Torah. That's the opinion of our sages. We should not take vows. But if we do, we have to uphold them. So people often, when they're emotional, men or women, make a vow and then they're stuck with it. Women, according to the Torah, specifies that a woman can get out of her vow if she's a daughter living at home. Her father can nullify her vow for her. If she's a wife, her husband can nullify her vow for her, but only on the day that he hears of it. If he doesn't take action and nullify it on that day, then she's like everybody else. Her vow stands. You can go to a sage and seek to have your vow nullified, which can be done in some cases, but until that happens, you're stuck with that vow. So here, what they're saying is, okay, well, this wife took a vow not to benefit from her husband. It's kind of like a way out of a marriage. He, in a patriarchal system, he has the right to create a divorce. She doesn't. But if she takes this vow, he may have to divorce her, although he has that option of nullifying her vow on the day he hears of it. But if he doesn't nullify it, then he's going to have to divorce her, right? So what are they saying here? What are we dealing with here? A case where she vowed not to derive benefit from him, and her husband upheld it for her by neglecting to nullify her vow when he heard it. So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Eliezer maintains that he is putting his finger between her teeth, i.e., he causes the vow to be in effect by not nullifying it, and therefore he must redeem her and return her to her native province, because even though she took the vow, he didn't nullify it. So he's participating in the vow, and if that happened after she was taken captive, it's not going to work for him. Well, no, I'm saying she took that vow before she was taken captive, obviously, but he held it up, right? So he participated in the prohibition that makes her prohibited to him, and therefore he's going to have to redeem her, even though it was her vow that led to that prohibition. Right? So Rabbi Eliezer maintains that he is putting his finger between her teeth. He causes the vow to be in effect, and therefore, if she's taken captive, he must redeem her and return her to her native province. Even though she's not going to be able to come back to the marriage because of that vow, he nevertheless must redeem her from captivity. And Rabbi Yehoshua maintains that she put her finger between her own teeth. She is responsible for the vow because she is the one who initially pronounced it. So the Gemara asks, if Rabbi Yehoshua maintains that she put her finger between her own teeth, what is the payment of the marriage contract doing here? Why must he pay her marriage contract if it is her fault that they cannot remain married? And furthermore, which is a different question than being redeemed from captivity. And furthermore, it was stated above that Rabbi Nassan said, I asked Sumakos, when Rabbi Yehoshua said that he gives her the payment for her marriage contract, but he does not have to redeem her, was he referring to a case where he vowed that she may not derive benefit from him and she was subsequently taken captive? Or was he speaking of a case in which she was taken captive and then he made the vow that she may not derive benefit from him? And he said to me that it must be that the guy took the vow before and then he doesn't have to redeem her because now there's a prohibition on their marriage, but he does have to pay the marriage contract. But if this is referring to a case where she was the one who vowed not to derive benefit from him, then what difference is it to me whether he upheld her vow and she was subsequently taken captive, or she was taken captive and then he upheld her vow? Either way, there is no reason to be concerned that he might engage in trickery since she was the one who took the vow. So rather, this is actually referring to a case where he was the one who initially vowed that she may not derive benefit from him. And Abaye explains the Baraisa according to his line of reasoning, and Rav explains the Baraisa according to his line of reasoning. Abaye explains the Baraisa according to his own line of reasoning like this. With regard to a widow who is married to a high priest, prohibited union, everyone agrees that he is obligated to redeem her. If she was a mamzeres, or a Gibeonite woman married to an Israelite, everyone agrees that he is not obligated to redeem her. So what's the difference? A high priest is not permitted to marry a widow, but the marriage itself is an actual marriage. They will have to divorce. An Israelite is not permitted to marry a mamzeres because that marriage itself is just completely prohibited. It's not possible. I think that's the difference. And that's why there's a different outcome. If she was a mamzeres or a Gibeonite woman married to an Israelite, everyone agrees that he is not obligated to redeem her. In the case of a priest who takes a vow prohibiting his wife, i.e. the wife of a priest, from deriving benefit from him, likewise everyone agrees that he is obligated to redeem her, as this is the same as the case of a widow who is married to a high priest, as he can fulfill the requirement to restore her to her native province. When they disagree, it is in the case of an Israelite who vows that his wife, meaning the wife of an Israelite, may not derive benefit from him. Rabbi Eliezer follows the status of the woman at the outset, i.e. when the marriage contract was written, since at that time he could restore her to be his wife, the obligation he took upon himself to redeem her from captivity remains in effect. And despite the fact that he can no longer do so due to her vow. And Rabbi Yehoshua follows the status of the woman at the end and holds that since in practice this husband cannot take her back as his wife because of the vow, he is no longer obligated to ransom her. Similarly, Rav explains the Baraisa according to his own line of reasoning. In the case of a widow married to a high priest and a mamzeres or a Gibeonite woman married to an Israelite, everyone agrees that he is not obligated to redeem her because the prohibition against her remaining married to him results from a cause other than her captivity. When they disagree, it is with regard to one who vows that his wife may not derive benefit from him, whether she is the wife of the priest or the wife of an Israelite. And Rabbi Eliezer follows her status at the outset and holds that since he is obligated to ransom her when he wrote the marriage contract, he must act accordingly. And Rabbi Yehoshua follows her status at the end and holds that since he cannot fulfill his obligation to restore her as his wife due to a factor other than her captivity, he is entirely exempt from redeeming her. And that's what they're going to say about that question. The Mishnah taught that if she was taken captive, her husband is obligated to redeem her. The sages taught in a Baraisa, in the case of a wife who was taken captive in her husband's lifetime, and afterward her husband died before he could redeem her. If her husband was aware of her captivity, the heirs, his heirs, the ones who inherit his estate, they are obligated to redeem her. But if her husband was not aware that she had been taken captive, then his heirs are not obligated to redeem her. And the Gemara relates, Levi thought to act in accordance with this Baraisa, and Rav said to him, my uncle, Rabbi Chia, said like this, the halacha, the law, is not in accordance with this Baraisa. Rather, it is in accordance with that which was taught in a different Baraisa. If she was taken captive after the death of her husband, the orphans are not obligated to redeem her. And moreover, even if she was taken captive in her husband's lifetime and he heard about it and afterward her husband died, the orphans are not obligated to redeem her, as I cannot apply to her the clause in the marriage contract, and I will restore you to me as a wife. Since this situation cannot be fulfilled because the man died, the obligation to redeem her does not apply. Now you would hope that the sons of this man, even if they're not necessarily the sons of his wife, and they have the means to do so, would redeem her from captivity. Morally speaking, you'd think they'd be obligated. But legally speaking, they're not obligated because that was an obligation on their father, not on them. The sages taught, if she was taken captive and they were seeking ransom from her husband of up to 10 times her value, i.e., far more than the usual ransom for a captive of this kind. On the first occasion she is taken captive, he must nevertheless redeem her. From this point forward, i.e., if she was taken captive a second time, if he wants to, he redeems her. But if he does not want to redeem her, he does not have to redeem her, as the sages obligated him to redeem her only once. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, and now we're on 52b, one does not redeem captives at more than their value. This policy is for the betterment of the world. Why? Because if captives are ransomed at exorbitant prices, this will encourage their captors to kidnap more people. And the Gemara notes this implies that if the captors seek a ransom, in accordance with their actual value, one does redeem captives, even though this includes a case where a woman's redemption is more than her marriage contract. But you see this underlying policy, hard for us to grapple with. But, think about it. Even in modern times, there are very dangerous areas in the world where kidnapping is very common. Or, if you think about all the terrorist attacks that happened on Israel. And Israel, for a long time, I don't know if still, but certainly had the policy for a long time, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Why? Because that encourages the terrorists to commit more terrorist acts and ultimately endangers more people. And it's kind of very hardcore policy, for the family that's got their loved one kidnapped. But you can see how that protects the rest of the population. And also, by the way, why kidnapping, which may not result in a murder, is a death penalty offense. And the Gemara raises a contradiction from a different Baraisa, which states, if she was taken captive and the captors were seeking from her husband a ransom of up to 10 times the value of her marriage contract, on the first occasion, he must redeem her. And from this point forward, if he wants to redeem her, he can, but if he does not want to redeem her, he does not have to redeem her. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the price of her ransom was equal to her marriage contract, he redeems her. If not, i.e. the price of her ransom was greater than the sum of money guaranteed to her in her marriage contract upon divorce or the death of her husband, he does not have to redeem her. He can suffice with paying her marriage contract. And the Gemara answers, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is of the opinion that there are two leniencies with regard to the laws of redemption. First, he maintains that one does not pay more than the general ransom given for such a captive. And second, the husband does not have to pay more than the sum of his wife's marriage contract. The Mishna taught on page 51a yesterday that if a woman was struck with illness, her husband is obligated to heal her. Excuse me, i.e. to pay for her medical expenses. So the sages taught in a Baraisa, in the case of a widow who is sustained from the property of the orphans and who requires medical treatment, her medical needs are like her sustenance, and the orphans must bear the costs. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees, and he says with regard to treatment that has a fixed cost, she is healed from her marriage contract, i.e. the amount is subtracted from her marriage contract. If it is a treatment that does not have a fixed cost, then it is considered like sustenance. Rabbi Yochanan said, the sages established that in the land of Israel, bloodletting is considered like a treatment that does not have a fixed cost, and therefore the heirs must pay for that treatment. This was in ancient times like the most common medical treatment. They would apply it to almost everything, no matter what's wrong with you. Releasing a little bit of your blood will calm you, soothe you, lead you to have more rest, and be a healing measure. And it's kind of amazing until how recent that was considered like standard practice for doctors. I mean, even 200 years ago, that was an incredibly common practice. So bloodletting is considered like a treatment that does not have a fixed cost. It's just part of somebody's sustenance. The relatives of Rabbi Yochanan had to take care of the wife of their father, who required treatment every day, and therefore her medical expenses were high. They came before Rabbi Yochanan to ask him what to do. He said to them, go and fix a lump sum with the doctor for his services. The treatment would then be considered as having a fixed cost, which is deducted from the marriage contract. Later, Rabbi Yochanan said, in regret, we have made ourselves like legal advisors who help people with their legal claims. And the Gemara asks at the outset, what did he hold, and ultimately what did he hold? The Gemara explains at the outset he held that one should act in accordance with the verse, and that you do not hide yourself from your own flesh, Isaiah 58:7, which indicates that one must help his relatives. And ultimately he held that an important person is different if a man of stature offers assistance to his family in a manner that causes a loss to another individual. It appears as though he were unfairly favoring his relatives. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7. Here we go, Mishnah number 8. If the husband of chapter 4 here in Tractate Kesubos, if the husband did not write for her in her marriage contract, any male children you will have from me will inherit the money of your marriage contract in addition to their portion of the inheritance that they receive together with their brothers. He is nevertheless obligated as though he had written it, as it is a stipulation of the court and therefore takes effect even if it is not explicitly stated. And likewise, if he omitted from the marriage contract the sentence, any female children you will have from me will sit in my house and be sustained from my property until they are taken by men, meaning until they are married. he is nevertheless obligated as though he had written it, as it too is a stipulation of the court. And similarly, if he omitted from the marriage contract the clause, you will sit in my house and be sustained from my property all the days you live as a widow in my house, he is nevertheless obligated as though he had written it, as it is a stipulation of the court. And the Mishna comments, the residents of Jerusalem would write in this manner, that a widow may remain in her husband's house throughout her widowhood, and the residents of the Galilee would write in this manner as well, like the inhabitants of Jerusalem. But in contrast, the residents of Judea would write, until the heirs want to give you your marriage contract. Consequently, if the heirs wish, they may give her marriage contract to her and release her, and then she must find her own living arrangements and provide for herself. That was Mishnah number 8. Now the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, for what reason did the sages enact the marriage document concerning male children? It was enacted so that a man will be willing to take the initiative and write an agreement to give his daughter a dowry as large as the portion of his possessions that his son will receive as an inheritance. The marriage document concerning male children ensures that even if one's daughter dies and her husband inherits her possessions, the dowry will eventually be inherited by her sons when her husband dies. Since the father of the bride knows that his grandchildren will inherit the dowry, he will give a larger dowry. Right? That's one of those things that's a little counterintuitive until you think about what are going to be the consequences of this policy down the line. Right? The fact that a marriage contract, all marriage contracts stipulate that the woman's sons are going to inherit her marriage contract, even if she dies, leads fathers to create larger dowries for their daughters, knowing that the money he gives to his daughter, even if she dies, will pass to his grandchildren and not be absorbed by his son-in-law, who might remarry and use that money for someone else. The Gemara asks, and is there anything that justifies a situation where the merciful one says that the son inherits and the daughter does not inherit, and yet the sages came and enacted that the daughters should inherit? The practical effect of their decree is that daughters receive a significant portion of their father's estate, just like sons. And the Gemara answers, this also applies by Torah law, as it is written, take wives for yourselves, and bear sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands. Jeremiah 29:6. So this verse requires clarification. Granted, sons are in his hands, i.e. a father can select wives for them. But daughters, are they in his power that he can select husbands for them? It is not the manner of a woman or her family to go courting a man. So rather, the verse teaches us this, that the father should dress her and cover her and give her something, meaning property, so that men will take the initiative with her and come to marry her. When the verse instructs fathers to marry off their daughters, it means that they must make efforts to ensure this outcome, including bestowing a dowry. The Gemara asks, and up to how much must a father give his daughters? And Abaye and Rava both say, they who usually disagree with each other now agree, up to 1/10 of one's property should be handed over to his daughter for her dowry. Presumably, if a man has 12 daughters, he's not going to give each one 1/10 of his property, since he would run out of property. But they're just saying up to that much and not more. The Gemara continues to ask, but if the concern is that the father will not give, say that in a case where the father wrote a large dowry for his daughter, let the husband also write the stipulation in the marriage document concerning male children. And when the father did not write a large dowry, let the husband not write this stipulation. The Gemara replies, the sages did not distinguish between these cases, although the main purpose of their enactment was to encourage fathers to provide their daughters with generous dowries. The sages applied their decree equally to all women, even when the father failed to do so. The law was meant to create, this kind of behavior among the population. Of course, there would be exceptions, but you're not going to have different stipulations and different marriage contracts about whether people followed this policy or not. The fact is, the money of the marriage contract will go to the wife upon the death or divorce of the husband. And if she dies, that money is going to flow to her children if she has them. The Gemara poses another question. If the aim is to ensure that the money of the marriage contract will remain with the woman's descendants, in a case where one has a daughter from one woman among his sons from another woman, the daughter should likewise inherit the mother's dowry. Why do only male children inherit their mother's dowry? And the Gemara responds, the sages established this enactment as similar to the law of inheritance. Just as a regular inheritance belongs to sons and not daughters, the same applies to the marriage document concerning male children. The Gemara continues to inquire, why shouldn't one at least say, I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. Why shouldn't one at least say that a daughter among daughters should inherit? If he had a daughter from his wife, and his other children are also daughters, in which case all the daughters divide the inheritance, the daughters of each wife should receive the portion that her maternal grandfather gave to her mother. And the Gemara again answers, the sages did not distinguish between these cases when establishing their decree. The Gemara further asks, and let the marriage document concerning male children be collected even from movable property, if that is all the father possesses. The Gemara replies, the sages established this enactment is similar to a regular marriage contract, which can be collected only from land. And as we saw yesterday, the day before, the Geonim, the leaders of the generations in the next period after the Talmudic period, they actually did enact that you can collect a marriage contract from movable assets, just as you could previously only from land. And presumably they probably also changed this as well, that the sons of a mother who died could collect her dowry from movable assets. But I'm not sure. The Gemara poses yet another question. Let it be collected even from property on which there is a liened property, i.e. property that the father sold after he wrote the marriage contract. And the Gemara answers that we learned in the Mishna, will inherit, and one's heirs do not inherit property that he has sold. The Gemara asks, but if this is the reason for the enactment, say that it should apply even though there is no more than a dinar beyond the value of the marriage contract that the father left over in his estate. And the sages stated that if no property is left for the inheritance, all the sons share the inheritance equally in accordance with Torah law. And the Gemara answers, in a case where their decree would entirely uproot the law of inheritance by Torah law, the sages did not enact the marriage document provision concerning male children of a mom who dies. Okay, that's what we've got today. Let me just check a few comments and questions if I can. I see you guys are talking amongst yourselves. Bill, I remember back in the day when Do the Whole Daf was rare enough to end up in the title of the episode, right? Back in the day. This class has evolved. Sharon, what would motivate a person to vow for a spouse not to derive benefit from one another? What would? I feel like the only reason you would take that vow is because you're looking for a back door to end the marriage, right? And that's another one of those sort of legal questions that comes up often in the Talmud, but is never tied to an incident, right? So I don't think that's a real world question. That's sort of pushing the boundaries of their understanding of the law to see what would happen in such a case. The reason they need to discuss that case is that's a kind of external prohibition on a marriage that was created during the marriage, right? But not by captivity. That's really the question that they needed. Whereas the captivity would create a prohibition on a priest to remain married to his wife because of the rape involved. That wouldn't create a prohibition on the marriage in the case of a regular Jewish couple where he's not a priest. But one of them taking that vow would create that prohibition from within the marriage, and that's why it became an interesting legal question. Bill, if it's illicit for a Cohen to marry a widow, it's not illicit. It's licit. I see what you're saying. It's legal for a Cohen to marry a widow, but the Cohen Gadol, the high priest, cannot marry a widow. But suppose a man who is a Cohen marries a widow, and then years later he becomes the Cohen Gadol. We had that question. He can remain married to her because when he married her it was fine. Is the Cohen Gadol now obligated to divorce her? No, I'm pretty sure it was legal for him to stay. What he can't do is marry a widow. He can remain married to a widow. Does that make sense? Right. He married a widow when it was permitted for him to marry her, and then he became Cohen Gadol. He does not have to divorce her. Yes. What is this? Right, so we're talking about redeeming captives. Sharon says the capture issue remains a huge issue even today for Israel. The government will permit family to try to gain their freedom, but the government officially doesn't negotiate with terrorists because it encourages more kidnappings, like we talked about. Okay, my friends, that is what I've got for us this evening. With God's help, we'll be together again on Monday. No class tomorrow because I'm going to a wedding. You can join me in wishing Mazel Tov to the Hassan and Kala, to the bride, to the groom and the bride. And may they have a long and happy life together. And I look forward very much to reuniting with you on Monday at a regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We'll do a double daf. Now, when we do the double daf, there we might not do the entire both pages because I think these are 2 full-size pages and that would be a very long class. But we'll see. We'll see what we can do. But we will, with God's help, blow the shofar that night as we do blow it during the day, every day in the month of Elul. And that begins tomorrow morning. I will try to, post a little shofar video on Facebook. Maybe I'll even go live and take dedications. I'll see what I can do. But at any rate, a good Vach, Shavua Tov, a good Hodesh. You should have a good week. You should have a great month. This is a very special month, Elul, as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah. Make sure that you're making that Heshbon HaNefesh, right? That accounting of the soul. That's our job, all of us. It's our job, all of us, by the way, Jews and non-Jews. It's our job in this month, the final month of the year before Rosh Hashanah, to make a fearless moral accounting, to borrow language. I believe that's what they call it in 12-step programs. A fearless moral accounting. Where are we doing well? Where are we falling short? How can we do better in the coming year? How are we going to organize ourselves so that it is not a pipe dream that we're going to do better, but to actually take on a practice that will help us do better in this world and come closer to fulfilling our mission, the mission for which God sent us into this world. All the best.